I decided to do my informative speech on Ronald Reagan. I admire him, and I found out that my son didn't know who he was, so I thought it would be a good thing for him to learn about. And when I began looking at his life and some of the quotes that came out of his mouth, I thought this was an interesting one that kind of said a lot about who he was. It says, "I know in my heart that man is good, that what is right will always eventually triumph, and there's purpose and worth to each and every life." And now I have a quiz. Does anybody know what year Ronald Reagan was born?
1911.
Right. Do we know Ronald Reagan was the what number president?
42nd.
No, he wasn't 42nd.
40th.
40th, right. He served as governor of what U.S. state?
California.
California. And what was his favorite candy? Does anybody know that? Jelly beans, right. And which of the following justices did Ronald Reagan appoint to the U.S. Supreme Court? Sandra Day O'Connor, William H. Rehnquist, Anthony Kennedy, or all of the above?
Sandra Day
All of
O'Connor.
All of them. Sandra Day O'Connor was the first woman ever appointed to the Supreme Court, and Ronald Reagan appointed her. Just some about his early life. He was born February 6, 1911, to John Edward Reagan and Nell Wilson. He had an older brother, Neil. And one thing that was interesting, he grew up in Tampico, Illinois, and he lived in this upstairs apartment over the H.C. Pitney variety store there. And I thought that was interesting. His father nicknamed him Dutch because he had a pudgy Dutch appearance and a Dutch boy haircut. So his father nicknamed him that. He was baptized at 11 into the Disciples of Christ religion, and a lot of people attribute that to the strong faith he had in the goodness of people. He went to high school in Dixon, Illinois, and college in Eureka, Illinois. And both in high school and college, he was actively participating in their student government, sports, and theater. He was the student body president in college and a member of the football team at Eureka College, and he was also the swim team captain. He was involved in theater as well, both in high school and in college. He was in the military service. He completed 14 home study courses and then enlisted in the reserve. As a captain in the AAF, his units produced some 400 training films. He wasn't actively serving in war. He was nearsighted, so he couldn't actively serve as a soldier, but he did work for the AAF and did some filming for their training. He began his career in radio broadcasting. He was a radio announcer at the University of Iowa and then at WOH Radio and WHO Radio, both in Iowa. While he was working for WHO Radio, he traveled to California on one of their jobs and attained a 7-year contract with Warner Brothers. Through Warner Brothers, he starred in 19 different movies in 2 years, which I thought was interesting. His favorite role, he says, was the role he played in King's Row. He also says that that's the role that made him a star, and a scene in that film gave him the idea for the Where's the Rest of Me? That was the title of an autobiography he wrote. He was married twice. He was married once to Jane Wyman back in 1940. They had 3 children together, Maureen, Elizabeth, Christine, who died as an infant, and then Michael, who they adopted. They divorced in 1949, which makes him the only president who's ever been divorced. He then married Nancy Davis in March of 1952, and they have 2 children, Patricia Ann and Ronald Prescott. His political career, as we talked about, he was the governor of California from 1967 to 1975. He was elected the President of the United States in 1980, and he served 2 terms. His campaign was to run on lower taxes, less government, states' rights, and strong national defense. His vice president was George H.W. Bush, George Sr., and he was the oldest man ever to be elected the president when he was 69. He's known for his Reaganomics, the war on drugs. The Iran-Contra affair occurred while he was in service. in presidency, and the Cold War ended while he was the president. Of course, we couldn't cover a whole lot about Ronald Reagan. There's so much to cover, but I hope that gives you an interest in him, and maybe you'd like to learn a little bit more about him. And I'd like to end with another quote that came out of his mouth. "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same." Thank you.
Yay, Joanna!